Welcome to Beyond Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Petrellis, and we are super excited for today's episode. A coach who I've known in the coaching world, or I should say I've heard about in the coaching world for a real long time. Someone who has, put the work as an assistant for a long time, has been a head coach at several places. And recently you might have heard about his coaching stint at Cardinal Spellman, but started coaching at 19 years old, spent 4 years at Holbrook Avon football program as an assistant, following another 10 years of a football assistant at Oliver Ames from 2009 to 2018. In that stint, was also the head wrestling coach for 5 years at Oliver Ames as well. Became the head football coach at Tri-County for 2 years with an cumulative record of 11-7. A father of three kids, a father of twins, and I know how relatable that is. That's my life every day. And over the last year and a half was the head football coach at Cardinal Spellman High School. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that today as well. But honored to have him on the show. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Kahn Chace.
Hey, how you doing? Pleasure to be on the podcast. Excited to talk about some football and, my story.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great to have you on here. I mean, we talked a little bit off air, but your story was very relatable to me, and I know we're going to share a lot of that today. But you're one hell of a coach too, and I think that's really important today to show off, the grind that you put in. I have a lot of coaches here. My 77th episode. I've had a lot of coaches on here that have put in the work, and spend years as an assistant coach, whether that's a positional person, and a coordinator, and then eventually get into that head coaching job. And you clearly have put in the work. You're a very qualified head coach. And even some of the stuff I found from, newspaper articles of you getting jobs or people speaking about you, you seem like a pretty top-notch guy. So I'm glad that the audience is going to get to hear a little bit more about you today, but obviously getting to know you a little bit more as well. So you took the long road. And what was really interesting is that, and you don't hear this too much, but you jumped into coaching football at 19 years old. So this was something you knew that you wanted to do, that you wanted to be, and this was a career path that you were going to follow. Talk about doing that at a young age, but also you put in 14 plus years as an assistant coach at a couple of different programs. Talk about growing as an assistant coach, what you learned about yourself, and obviously that fire that kept growing to eventually, wanting to become a head coach and take over your own program.
Yeah, so I got into coaching because, as a kid, I had a rough upbringing, that wasn't always great at home and everything like that. And my coaches, I leaned on them. They became father figures and people who took care of me. And I wouldn't have had success in school if it wasn't for my coaches. So, and then one of my coaches got a head coach job at Holbrook Avon right after. And, it was a no brainer. I came and helped him. And I always had that close relationship with them. And I want to coach because I enjoy giving back to the kids. I really care about the kids. I care about seeing them succeed. No, not every person needs that kind of same thing that I had, but some kids do, and I've experienced that throughout my years too. And that I think that's why I wanted to be a head coach, because you get to affect that part of the game a lot in a bigger, broad sense than as an assistant. Although you can do it in both, but the head coach touches every kid in the program all the way through. So that's why I like that.
Now, were you more like on the offensive side of the ball, defensive side of the ball? I mean, if you, as an assistant, where did you see yourself more?
Uh, I can't put myself in a box because I honestly have worked on both sides of the ball and I've loved both sides of the ball. I've been an offensive coordinator, I've been a defensive coordinator. The last 2 years at Spellman, I did all three
Yeah.
because of what we've had to do. So I really do love offensive football, and I think most people do. But I can't paint myself in the box. I think I've spent my whole life studying football, so I feel pretty good about both sides of the ball.
Yeah, it's so interesting when people ask me that, like when I coach, I never really hesitate. I always said defense. And to me, offense is sexy and offense is fun, and scoring points and different formations and really kind of manipulating defenses. Like when you motion and you know what they're going to go into, now you're like, okay, this is what we can do out of this because this is what they're going to do. And you get into this or trips or whatever. But there's a part of me that on the other side is just like, I want to stop that. I want to outsmart them. I want to be able to kind of be like, oh, this team's scoring 40 a game. Like, I want to shut this team down. Like, there's just something about it to me that defense has always stuck out a little bit more to me. But as being a head coach, you have to be balanced, right? And you throw in special teams there too, because I went to a high school football game this week. I covered Malden Catholic versus BC High, and it was a pretty even matchup. The difference in the game was BC High returned 3 kickoffs for a touchdown. And that was the difference in the game. I mean, it was 26-26 with 40 seconds left, and BC High won 40-26 because they returned the kickoff with the 40 seconds left. The third kickoff they returned, and then they picked six it when Malden Catholic was just kind of desperate to try to score. So you have to be balanced. Like you said, you can't necessarily put yourself in a box because then your team kind of becomes that in a sense that you might only be one-sided or one-dimensional, and without being balanced, you're not going to have success.
Yeah, as a head coach, I like doing offense because I can felt like I can control the game flow from an offense, and then there's no one to ask if we're going to go for it on fourth down. I know that in my head already, so that makes that stuff smoother. And then I always worked with the defensive coordinator, so he was my second hand man, but he didn't come with me to Spelman at first, so I had to venture more on defense the last couple of years. And now, like you said, I really enjoy the challenge of game planning for a offensive opponent and having a good plan to shut them down.
Yeah, especially like when you get teams in third and long and they're a little bit predictable in what they do. Like I found that we used to have defenders like one guy standing up, one guy down the line of scrimmage, everybody else like standing up and roaming around. You have like athletes on the field, and you watch film and like linemen just don't know who to block because everyone's showing like they're going, and then you drop back into a zone or drop back into a man with the free over the top. And yeah, it's fun. It's fun to game plan that for sure. And it eventually, of all these years of being an assistant coach, you got your first break or your first job at Tri-County. And there was a lot of great things that were said about you. But one thing that really stood out to me that I wanted to share was from a newspaper clipping. I forget exactly which paper I got it from. But the athletic director, who you were very complimentary of over there, saying that, she was one of the more hardworking athletic directors out there. But the words that were said about you were that one of the biggest reasons was your emphasis on relation building with the kids. And it says the importance of building a rapport and getting them to trust in him and his leadership style and his scheme and to hit the ground running. And that's something that's great. And that's something I totally believe in myself. But I know that that's hard. Like that's also hard when you take over a program because of maybe what was there before, what the culture. And I'm not saying it was bad or anything like that, but to take over a program and be a different voice and to do things a little bit differently, that's kind of hard to do. So I'm just curious, as someone who thinks similarly. I mean, how do you hit the ground running doing something like that you get the team to really start buying in from day one?
Yeah, that and they had success when I came to Tri County. They started to have some success going forward. That's why their coach moved on to like a higher division program, and so they weren't a bad football team. They just hadn't cracked the league championship in a long time. So when we walked in there, we had good players and we had kids that were eager to learn, and they saw how organized we were, and they saw how much we actually cared about them and got to know them through the as I took over the program, I interviewed each kid individually just to get to know them, and I think that went a long way as we went through the season. And then, it wasn't always good that year. We did win the league championship, and then we had some injuries going to the playoffs, but we never gave up on them. And then at the end of the year, we had lost to Old Colony in the Tech playoffs, and then 5 days later we had to play them again in the Wednesday night Thanksgiving stuff, and then we ended up coming back from 22-0 at halftime and beating them in overtime. So I just think that was a really good memory for those kids. And then that same group, that program, I had to guide them through the COVID stuff, and that was beginning, and they lost their fall season, and we had to have our season in the spring. Just going there every day we could, and then organizing workouts and going to workouts outside in the field with our masks on and stuff like that, doing Google chalk talks in February, even though we didn't know we were going to have football or not, just putting the time in with the kids. And I think those kids really appreciated that. And the hard work of the athletic director there, she was outstanding. She's the best one I've ever had. She was awesome. That place was awesome. A lot of great people there.
Yeah, I mean, let me just rewind a little bit. You mentioned that game against Old Colony. I know they're very good. I mean, I know they just lost their first game this weekend to the Neshoba Tech. So, and that's two really good teams playing each other. But I mean, that speaks volumes about you as a coach because, I mean, to put that into perspective, you lost the Tech Bowl to them. You got to then flip and play that team 5 days later. So your opponent similarly, but then you go down 22-0 at halftime. I'm just curious as like a fan, a coach, or whatever. I mean, what do you say to kids? And what was that turnaround in the second half? Because most teams, they get kicked in the gut like that. You lost a big game to that team. They're kind of handing it to you in the first half of a Thanksgiving game. And then all of a sudden you come out and scoring 28 or maybe even more points in that in a half is it's not easy to do, and to hold your opponent who's having their way with you. So talk a little bit about that. I'm just curious at how you rally the troops and really got that going.
I think we won that game because of the relationships with the kids. So they did trust us. That was a weird halftime. It was we played our Thanksgiving game at Bellingham High because it was under the lights and Tri County doesn't have lights. And it was a thunder like we had lightning at halftime. So we had to go into a school bus at halftime. And then all we talked about was not X's and O's, anything else. I said, guys, what a weird night, right? Anything can happen tonight. How about we just go out there and just have fun and just worry about your individual opponent and just, play aggressively and just let it all hang loose and let's see what happens. We went down, scored the first drive. We got a turnover. They started, they were still moving it, but they some of their kids started to get banged up because our kids were hitting them, and we got it tied going into overtime. They scored the first one, so now we're still down again, and we scored, and then we did a little trick play, a little reverse pass to win it on the last play of the game. So I'll never forget
Oh
that
wow!
night.
So what was the final? What was the final?
I believe it was 30-28.
All right,
Or
so they
yes,
scored
yeah,
too. So
30.
it was. I mean, you scored every possession. You had to have, right? I mean, pretty much in that second
Pretty
half.
much, yeah. We had to get a couple big stops in that game. They ran that double wing offense, which is really
Yeah,
hard to stop, and especially once they get it rolling, they were really good that year. They really
yeah,
were. But we a lot of the time during that season we didn't play our quarterback on defense, and it was like it's his last game, so we threw him out there, and that was a
right.
good choice.
That's
That was a good choice.
that's like the water boy, like when they keep saying like last game of the year, But that's so interesting because obviously double tight, double wing for those people out there that are listening. I mean, some people argue, yeah, it's only 5 or 6 plays, but it's not easy to stop. I mean, the guards, yes, they pull tackles, they pull every play and kind of take you to it. But I've seen it with St. Mary's, and I've seen it with Austin Prep before that, and two completely different styles of running it. So there is that speed and dash and strength, and there's also that finesse of living on 3 or 4 yards every play and running the clock and eating the clock. And you don't have to have skill to do that. If you can put it in a couple times and play solid defense, you control the clock. You mentioned that as an OC, like that's one power you do have is that you do have the control of tempo, right? And that offense
Yeah,
can, yeah,
those ones get really good. He's really good at teaching it. It's like, yeah, they get that. They call it the superpower, whatever they call it. It's the
yeah.
superpower play, and it's when they start cutting it back that becomes they can take it. Randolph won a Super Bowl with it last year. Like that offense is successful a lot of places.
Yeah, and it's like our head coach when I coached under Serge Clifford, the one thing he used to always say, and I used to copycat it, and I still say it to this day against that offense. It's like that offense is predecessed on high school kids not being disciplined enough to follow their keys and read their keys, and if you do that, you kind of know like if they're running the ball or throwing the ball based off of what the tight ends do right off the line, what the guard and tackles do right off the line, and if you try watching the ball in the backfield and figure out where it's going before you know it, the ball's already 10 yards by you, right? So
Yeah.
very, very interesting style of offense. But like you said, it is not easy to stop when it's rolling, and especially when coaches know how to coach it and can
Yep.
adjust and change how they pull and change different ways of doing everything. So we talked about that offense a little bit. Let's talk about you stylistically. What type of offense do you run? What type of defense do you run? I mean, I know defensively sometimes it's based off of what you have year to year, but typically what is kind of like your identity on both sides of the ball?
Yeah. So offensively, I grew up in the I offense, and then at Olive Reigns we ran the Tony Franklin spread, and
Yep.
then but offense is offense to me. So if you watch us play, we run power counter, inside zone, outside zone, with some of our spread passing plays, and it's what you would see on when you turn on the NFL or you turn on college. You could see our plays is what you see with that. I like to move the pieces a lot. I call them moving the pieces. I like to try to use formations to gain advantages. This year we were running more wing. It would look like wing T, but it really wasn't wing T. Depending on the players, I always like to run the quarterback a lot if we have a kid that can do that. I think that's really puts a lot of stress on the defense, especially the closer you get to the goal line. It's an extra guy we can put in blocking and everything like that. Defensively, 4-2-5. But what that means is I could look like a 4-4, a 3-3
Right.
stack, or a 3-4, depending on how we adjust it. Like we're key read defense. We use our umbrella run fits, which I mean they have every kid has a specific run fit and a key and an assignment to do, and it doesn't matter where they line up. We might look like we're an odd front, but the kids are doing the same things each play. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
No, totally. I mean, TCU made that famous. I mean, I remember a few years I ran that at Arlington Catholic, and eventually one of the years I had to kind of go back to our 3-4 just because of injuries, and we just really didn't have the kids in key spots that made us tough. That made us tough
Yeah.
in that defense. So I love that. I think that stylistically, there's so many different ways you can look at a pre-snap read, and a quarterback can look at, and then you drop guys or bring guys up or bring more guys up to the line. You can look a lot different, and that pre-snap read no longer it's not what you think it is. So
Yeah,
no,
it's very.
absolutely.
That's why I like the 4-2-5. Very adaptable to if we're playing a wing tee or a spread, we have a plan and we know what to go to.
Yeah. No, it's great. And I think, offensively, when you kind of mentioned, just there's so many coaches that run spread that have said on this show, they run spread, but we're run first, and I used to play Spelman. When we prepare for Spelman, it was the worst week. I hated preparing for them because it was 9,000 formations, unbalanced thing. Like, and it was only like 6, 7 plays, but to like have 3 or 4 days to really teach it, to go over it, to prepare it, and then when you're running unbalanced, having that tackle who has the eligible number on the other side, and just having to teach that and go over that and waste time doing that, because 9 out of 9, 9.9999 times, they're never releasing that guy. But the one time that they do, you kind of have to have someone over the top and understand that that guy is eligible. So I totally get formation teams, and I think it's just so smart because nowadays, some coaches just stay in a base and what they are, and by bringing another guy on the line, whether it's adding a tight end or having a tight end wing combo and being able to run power that way, you can outnumber guys at the line of scrimmage, and that's the name of the game on offense. Number guys at the point of attack. So
Yep.
that's great. So we're gonna jump into some of the stuff with obviously from Tri County, then went to Cardinal Spellman. But before we do that, we're gonna do our famous Cheney's 2 minute drill. Cheney's is one of our sponsors. They're right around the corner from the Boston Garden, right on French Street. I've been a friend of the show since day one. Honestly, since we started, they were like one of the first people to reach out to us about what we're doing. We've had a lot of fun with them, so we named our 2 minute segment after them. So this is a rapid fire segment, Coach. I'm just gonna fire questions at you, 1 or 2 word answers. You don't have to go crazy here. I'm not going to ask you anything that's controversial. I do get a red flag. If I want you to explain something a little bit more, I
Okay.
might throw it more out of fun than anything else. And like I said, if you want to explain something a little bit more too, you most certainly can. We're pretty lenient here. So let me get the timer set, and here we go. 4th and goal from the 3 yard line. What are you running?
Speed option.
Okay. Coach that had the biggest influence on you, or a coach that maybe you just have a lot of respect for in the high school football game today?
Fran Cass, head coach at Wareham High School.
Okay. I'll give you a chance to explain that. I'll throw the
Yeah.
red flag.
Yeah. So Fran Cass was my offensive line coach when I graduated from Middleborough High School, and that's where I started coaching. Was with him at Holbrook Avon, and he took care of me. He taught me a lot about football, especially offensive line. So that's where I got my start. Was definitely he helped me out a lot.
Cool. All right, back on. 4-2-5. What's the most important defensive position in that for you?
The overhang safeties.
Okay. Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, that's eventually why I had to get out of it, because we lost that and I didn't have a kid to do it. So all right, so I'll flip this on you. 4th and goal to win the game. Would you rather win it on offense or win it on defense?
Offense. It's less stressful.
That's so true, though. You have control, right? Um, Outside of the quarterback, what's the most important position in your offense?
Um, Offensive line.
Yeah, any
Can I say
position,
the line?
right?
Can I say the line?
That's fine with me. That's totally fine with me. As a coach, you've been to a ton of high school games, home and away. There's always music playing. What song just kind of gets you a little juiced up that you still hear a little bit, bobs your head when you hear it, or maybe you listen to it before a big game yourself?
I, I, I like the Iron Man. That was our band in high school used to always play that, and I liked that.
There's nothing better than a high school band. I've gone to a couple games and it's a different atmosphere. It's a different vibe, like first downs, touchdowns, big plays. The band starts playing. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's
I love
awesome.
it. Um, One word to describe your coaching style on the sideline.
Passionate.
Okay, that's a very common answer amongst a lot of high school coaches. I take that so many different ways, but I love it. It's a very
Yeah.
very fun answer. Um, I'll ask you something away from football a little bit,
Yeah.
just because this is relatable for me. Hardest thing about being a dad of twins.
Um, when they both poop at the same time.
That is true, and for people that are listening out there, that's pretty legitimate. For
It's
me,
just stressful.
for me, it was always, and I don't know how you handle it, but for us, it was always if one wakes up, we're waking the other
Um,
one up. You know what I
that
mean?
is our new problem. I'm getting into that now.
Yeah, that was something my wife and I for like a year and a half, just grinded doing. Like if one of them got up for whatever reason, I shouldn't even say maybe like a year, especially with feedings and stuff like that. But it was like the other one's getting up because I am not staying up with this one, and as soon as this one goes down, the other one gets up crying, and then you're up for an additional hour. You know what I mean? So
That's been
that
our
was
life
something
the
we did.
last month.
Oh, I feel your pain. I feel your pain.
We
Uh,
have girl boy twins. The girl loves to wake up, and the boy
Yeah, that's how
he
I am too. Yeah,
yeah.
same thing. Jeez, my daughter loves sleeping now, though. My daughter like loves going to bed. My son, no, no.
Yeah, yeah, it's the
Uh,
opposite for us.
and the last question I'll ask you, I ask every coach that comes on here:
Yeah.
how many wins the Patriots get at the end of the season?
I got one today, so 9.
Okay, all right. Most coaches around that 9, 10 mark, so it's pretty
I'm
consistent.
hopeful.
Yeah. Well, listen, coach, you survived the 2 minute drill. And that kind of is that kind of signifies, like we're halfway through this podcast a little bit. And, we really focused on kind of you building your career and where you got to. In the second half, we're going to focus a little bit over the last year and a half. So after you left Tri County, you took over for Ron St. George over at Condell Spellman High School. I know Ron, I coached against him as a coordinator for a while and even a couple years as a head coach. I shared a really funny story with you, but my first year playing them, they were pretty good and we were playing a lot better the second half of the year. And I sent them an incredible film that you probably could see the kids' faces and eye color. And I got a phone call from him about how the film wasn't great and how dare I do that, blah, blah, blah. And I knew it was a mental head game. The guy was very nice to me off season when I got the job, everything else. But a legendary coach, a guy who I hated to prepare against because he was very smart and you knew you'd have to be ready to adjust 3 or 4 different times in a game to what he's doing. But funny story. I mean, him and I laughed about it after the game when we talked on the field too. So nothing
Yeah,
bad
I
to
got a.
say.
It's funny because I have a similar film. We used to scrimmage with Ron, and I coached with one of his former players, so I know him very well.
Yeah.
And when I was coaching at Tri County, we played Spellman, and we did have a bad film. It was a bad day, but and that's when they were undefeated. They went the number one seed in the playoffs, and we're a Division 8 team. They're a couple divisions higher. And I just said to him before the game, he's like, "Whoa, what's up with the film?" And I said, "Coach, if you need that film to beat us today, then you should probably retire." They won by 30, so
Yeah,
he
yeah,
didn't have to
yeah.
retire.
My assistants were getting like all fired up about it, and I was like, guys, he's trying to get into my head because this is my first year here. Like, it ain't happening. Like, we know we sent a good film. But no, great guy. I mean,
Yeah,
legendary coach, a zillion wins, Hall of Fame, just an all-time coach.
yeah,
But you took over that program, and obviously, I just said all these great things about him, and you coming in and really building the player relationships and building that. Each individual kid is important, and you said it at the top of this. It's about building those relationships, and as a head coach, you have the opportunity to kind of really have an impact on every single player's life. So, talk about coming in and taking over for a guy like that. Like, obviously, I took over for a coach who was somewhere for 30 years. So coming in, there's obviously expectations, but there's also nerves. I mean, taking over for someone who's that good.
yeah. And it was a difficult situation because the COVID season, we'll call it, didn't go well for Spellman, and it was kind of left the program in low numbers and not in the best situation too. And then coming in, I got hired in the middle of July, so you have less than a month to get ready for our football season and put together a staff and everything like that. So it was really stressful in the beginning. And then we still were in the midst of kind of COVID stuff. So we still didn't have locker rooms. You couldn't be inside with the kids a lot of the time. So it's really hard challenge at the beginning. That's why I thought we probably started a little slower than we should have that first year. But yeah, that was really stressful part, and I didn't get the relationships until halfway through that season, and some of them may have been lost because of all that stuff.
Yeah, and you taking over a program that goes right into that went right into COVID, and like you said, numbers were probably down, morale was down, and truthfully, for coaches, no one was prepared for it. I mean, no one was prepared, obviously, and getting hired in July, that gives you no off season. That really gives you no time to meet your players and get into spring 7-on-7s or have a consistent weight room program that's going on. And obviously, there's probably all limitations to that stuff still at that
Yeah,
point when you got the job. In that first year, as any head coach knows, or anybody who's listened to guests that we've had on here, you're really trying to build your culture and you're really trying to build your program. And yeah, any coach wants to come in and win a bunch of games and be successful and obviously have their last game be the last possible game they could play. But one of the key moments of your first year at Cardinal Spellman was upsetting St. Mary's of Lynn. And you upset them, a team that is, just for people out there, wins 10, 11 games a year for the most time, beats teams pretty good, is always in the running for state championship, whether they're playing in the Super Bowl, the game before the Super Bowl, and you guys upset them and beat them. And for you, you won New England Patriots Coach of the Week, and for that, and that's an award that is not easy to get. I mean, there's a zillion high schools that play, but to win that and to beat a team like that, I mean, I'm sure that was a huge boost for your program, but also for you, the hard work. Like you said, you came in and took over what you took over, and let's call it what it was, right? Talk about winning that and what that meant not only for you, but maybe your program going forward for the rest of the year after that.
yeah, I'm pretty lucky coach, I think, because at Tri County after 1 year, I got nominated to be one of the Shriners coaches too, and I got to do that this summer, and that was really fun. So I think a lot of it is luck, but I think part of it is the peers that see what we do as a coaching staff, because you get a lot of that attention from your peers, and I think that when you get those awards, it's happy for my staff and happy for the kids because you don't get success unless everyone's kind of buying into what you're doing. And by week 6, then, we're 0-6. There was no reason for us to play hard, but the kids have been steadily getting better throughout that year. And everyone talks about looking at small improvements, but I could see that they were doing small things better. I was like, all right, we can get in the consolation games and maybe get a couple, finish the season off well. And it's just one of those games where they kept us in it, and then all of a sudden it became, fourth quarter and the game's tied. And, our kids made a couple of ridiculous plays. And, I say speed option because we ran speed option for the 2-point play to win it.
To
So
win
that's why.
that. Hey, listen, right? If it works, say it, right? And
Yeah,
for
so
you,
that was good. That was good. It was really good to see for the people who worked for me, because there's some of the coaches I brought in. I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I brought you into this." Like, I think I said that to a couple of my coaches, and then they kept working really hard, and I really appreciate those guys and what they did for those kids.
and what do you get to do when you win that? Do you get to go down to Gillette Stadium? I mean, how does that all kind of work when you win an award like that?
Yeah, that was fun because then Andre Tippett comes in, shakes your hands. He's got massive hands.
Right, right.
You don't want to fight that guy. He's a really nice guy. He comes in, and you get to do all that for a week, and then yeah, I didn't even know. And then I got an email. They send you to a Patriots game. Unfortunately, it was the Bills game where they didn't stop
Uh,
them once.
yeah, yeah.
Right, you got to sit at the table with all the other coaches who won it and get to talk, and that was a funny moment too, because I'm sitting around with all these coaches that undefeated seasons and Super Bowls, and I said, you guys are all doing it wrong. You have to just be really bad from 90% of the year and do one good thing.
And just beat that one really good team,
That's all
right?
you have to do. You guys are wasting your time with all this winning.
Just curiosity. I mean, we talked about the double tight, double wing earlier. And I mean, and that is basically what St. Mary's is. Obviously, they window dress and do things a little differently as well. Did you go into that game being like, well, I've seen, I mean, their style of it is different. There's a speed and power like combined. But going into it, you've obviously seen that offense and variations of it so much. Going into that game, did you have a level of confidence like, hey, we could stop these guys? I've seen this enough to know we got to execute X, Y, and Z to have a chance here?
Yeah, I just think that my my defensive structure is built to play teams who use pullers because our kids are really good with their key reads after, especially through the mid part of the season. Like even this year, we played Nantucket in the beginning of the year, and they started false pulling their guards because our linebackers just they see it and they go.
Yeah.
St. Mary's they've expanded, so they're more like they'll do some shotgun, pretty much single wing maybe stuff, or I call it wing T. Anything like that, I call it wing T. But
Yeah.
no, I was pretty. I like going against that because then I'm just like, all right, we can stay in cover three most of the game, and that's that. If I have to choose, that's what I like to do. But I felt that our kids were getting really good at their key reads, and to me, that's really important. And I'm like that, and then they trusted, and they had some success doing it. And the more success they had doing it, the more they trusted it, and then that ended in that game.
Yeah, so I mean, I just know seeing that team, I love seeing that style of offense too, because to me it is a little bit not easy to prepare for, but you know exactly what you got to prepare for. And you just have to beat it in practice. Like you just have to let the kids see it over and over and over and over. And even to the point that I used to sit back and be like, all right, I'm just gonna watch what the safety does here. This tight end's releasing. I want to see what his first step is. I want to see what his call is, or let's watch the two middle linebackers here. I want to see what they see those for like, and you just pick kids to watch. And that's like what I mean, I used to do to prepare, but the same areas is loaded. That is no small feat what you did and to upset them. And and that was a great win. And obviously for you, it's a great boost for the program. I mean, who knows when's the last time they had beaten that team, especially, the last time I could think was maybe like 2014, 2015. Maybe there was a year in between there they may have, but just
Yeah,
thinking back.
2019, Ron had
Okay.
a really good team. Yeah,
Yeah,
won
okay.
the league that year. So
Yeah, so here and there, right? And yeah, so obviously really good program, so huge win for you. And that kind of leads us into some of the bigger things that have transpired over the last like few months. And so going into year two, obviously you took a program over that from a COVID year, which every program was probably different after a COVID year. Numbers were lower. You have a huge win in the middle of the season, helps boost your kids to be like, hey, we can play against anybody. You come into the beginning of the season, you're playing tough, you're playing strong, and then about halfway through the season, you resigned and stepped down as the head football coach there. And it was an interesting story. It was an article that I read that kind of turned into a couple of news stories, being on television, you getting interviewed, and it really hit home to me because some of the things that I read and some of the things that I heard you say. I had similar experiences as a head coach myself, and I feel like this is a topic that's not talked about enough because whether schools are afraid to talk about it or whether they're afraid of the backlash that could happen from it. But I'm just gonna like read a couple of different things, and then I really want to give you the floor to really talk about it because it's your story, not mine, and I'm not here to try to pretend to tell it. But a couple things that stood out to me just listening to the news. Like you had said at one point, like last year we had a guy follow our assistant coaches out of the booth talking. He felt like there were just a lot of personal attacks, vulgar language, even at the school having to exit from a different door. And if I'm wrong about any of this, please fact check me. At times, maybe even having to exit or leave from a different part of the school or a different exit from maybe where the main exit was. And then not being able, and this is what like kind of like struck a chord with me, like telling your wife like not to come with your family or not to bring your kids there just because of some of the things that were going on. So when I heard the story, I had reached out to you shortly after it, and obviously we both being dads of twins, like it's just life's crazy. We couldn't make it work, but here we are now, and I want to give you an opportunity and really the floor to talk about this. And if you don't mind, just asking you a few questions about it, and
yeah.
talk about what you want to talk about. But you're a hell of a coach. Obviously, your record speaks for itself, and your resume speaks for itself. So I am interested to hear this a little bit more.
Yeah, and it wasn't all bad. I was pretty proud of what we did there. We grew the program by 20 kids in one, and that's we have 450 kids in the whole school, probably less than 200 boys, and to get 60 kids, to go from 38 to 60 kids in one year, I was really proud. To me, that I thought that showed that we had a positive environment for the kids, and kids wanted to be there. So that I was happy with that. And then there was problems with grades and detentions, and you know we didn't have that anymore. By the midway through last year, the tensions were way down, and this year they were non-existent. I didn't get any calls, and there was kids behaving in school and getting their grades. There was none of that stuff, and that stuff's all important to me. So
The most
that part of
important
it made
thing.
me
It's
happy.
the
Yeah,
most important thing. And
yeah, you
parent,
can't
like,
have anything else without
right,
that.
like, yeah,
So that was good. Um, and then you know, I and some of it gets blown out of proportion in the news and stuff like that. And
sure.
I really wasn't comfortable doing any of that stuff, but I do it because I think it's important because I've had a lot of coaches reach out to me and they feel a similar way. And I think having twins and having my family now and having three children and being more mature and older, the younger guy probably would have joined in with the people to try to, mix it up with them. But I wanted to be a good example for my family. And I think that was the number one reason why I've done this. It's really hard. I know it's going to affect me in the future. Hopefully it doesn't, because I still really want to coach. But um, I thought it was important to share the story and have it people hear. It was so frustrating that leaving in the middle of the season, it was very hard to do because there's still kids on the team you really like, and there's still families that you really love, and they put a lot of time into you. Um, I just didn't feel as the year was going on that I was in a, I wouldn't say unsafe. I don't think anyone's going to attack me. They could, but I just think I didn't want to be in a situation where I would have had to react in a way that would not, I couldn't make my family proud. I think that was the number one thing. And then other things is I don't mind if someone says, "Hey, why don't you run the ball? Why don't you pass the ball?" I don't care about
You're
that.
gonna
That's
get
like
that
normal.
anywhere, right? Yeah.
I don't care. That's not what it's about. It's no, hey, fat ass. Like stuff like my if I have my 3-year-old there and they're calling me all these names, that's their dad. Like I would never do that to another coach. I'll never do that when my children play sports. Like I might say we need to run the ball more, but I wouldn't be like attack. It was the personal part of it that really bothered me because you spend so much time with these people's kids and then you put so much effort into them, and as you know as a dad, that takes a toll on your family. So to have the lack of appreciation and the lack of respect, and it keeps building, it becomes a point where, you know what, I gotta go home. I want to go
Yeah.
home.
And that's what's really hard. I mean, if you don't mind me asking, like, was it a big group of people? Was it a smaller group of people? Was it just a few people? Was it just kind of all over the place? I mean, how would you kind of say that?
I think the vocal stuff in the stands that's been a problem because I know, the previous coaching staff was on the other sideline, couldn't wasn't on the home sideline. I wanted to be on the home sideline because that's what I've
Oh
always done.
yeah, and
That's
he
what
moved to the other side where it was just like wide open land, and you stay away from, yeah. And being an opposing player when you're behind that bench, you hear every conversation that's going on. So you clearly are going to hear when people are raising their voices and being negative in a poor way.
yeah, which is fine, but my way of doing things is pretty open door policy. If there's ever any problem that you ever had, I was always open. But you go through my emails. I didn't have one email, one call, one request for any kind of meeting that I was doing something wrong. So that's where it's like so bizarre. It's just like doing it publicly. I don't understand why that had to be done. If something wasn't going well with their children, just give me an email, give me a call, I'll meet with you. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I probably did do some things that wasn't the best. I don't know.
Yeah, but
I
regardless, you shouldn't be also taking a verbal lashing about your physical appearance or any of that stuff. And what gets me, I'm not affiliated with any school, so I can probably be a little bit more freer here, but um administrations at these games, your athletic directors at these games, school administrations at these games. I mean, they're hearing this stuff. They're seeing that this stuff's going on. And I noticed, like, in the paper when I read it, they mentioned personal reasons. And when you kind of went on the news, and if I'm speaking out of line, please tell me, you kind of said that was almost like the reason why you went forward publicly with this a little bit more, because they were saying, oh, for personal reasons, coach, stepped away, but they knew what was going on, as obviously did you. Is that kind of a catapult that made you say, you know what, I'm going to speak up because as a head coach, I've dealt with that. And you said this. There's a zillion other coaches who probably read that and saw that. And the outcry on Twitter for you and all the coaches that supported you and backed you and said what they had to say. I mean, that comment section goes on for pages and pages and pages of people that experience the same exact thing. So, what made you say, I'm speaking up about this? I'm going to share this a little bit more with the public?
Yeah, and like I haven't watched one story that I was in. I haven't read one of those things. I've ignored all of it. I did do more of the interviews because of that. It was no, I didn't leave for personal reasons. My For personal reasons, I would have told everyone what my personal reason was that I was leaving. I, it just felt like that was a way to sweep it under, and then there would be no change, and there would be no accountability. And I feel like I don't know how to go through that a little bit more, but that's pretty much it was the catapult. Saying it's personal reasons. Yeah, the personal reasons was I didn't feel safe with my family in the stands, so I felt like people should know that.
Yeah, and and let's be real, them just putting that statement out there doesn't look good for you going for a job in the future, whether it's a head coach or somewhere else, because most people look at that being, oh, this coach stepped away from the middle of the season. Like, why would we want to maybe have somebody come in this program in the near future when it's
And
no,
we
it's
we
about
were we were a good football team. Like
right.
we're not the best football team, but it was a pretty good competitive football team at the time before the infamous game happened. We were 2-2. They're going to the playoffs now. They won the last game. That was the goal, was to make the playoffs. That was the building part. It wasn't a bad team. I didn't. It wasn't a bad season. It was a good season, and that's where it was so bizarre to me that there's such aggression towards coaches that were working really hard to make it good for their kids.
And let's be real. I mean, I could say this, but it's all about tuition at the end of the day. The school's not going to say anything to people. They're not going to make a big deal about it because it's a black eye to their school. Like, let's be real. Like, if they're hearing that, they're not going to want to have someone's not going to want to come in and hear that that's going on and want to take over a program like that. One, two, but they're too afraid to say something or let it get out there because it looks bad for the school and schools like that. And I'm not dogging it, but it's the fact of the matter. It's all about tuition. It's all about keeping the school open, getting the numbers and the enrollment up, and yeah, they're going to sweep things under the rug like that and make it maybe not look as bad as it really is. And it's a shame because you're losing a lot of good coaches out there. There's a reason why high school football is being played on a Thursday night because you have officials who just don't want to deal with it anymore. They don't want to deal by getting yelled at by parents or getting followed to the parking lot or getting yelled at vulgar things. You have great coaches that are stepping away, like not coaches that are unsuccessful, not doing well, coaches who are just sick and tired of the nonsense that goes on, and schools just too afraid to kind of defend their coaches or stick up for them or do that, whether that's private or public. It's going on a lot, and it's a shame because it's ruining high school sports in a sense. Because you mentioned it, it's about the kids, and the kids are not getting the experience from these people that have been doing it for a long time and doing it the right way and building programs that are more just not about winning and losing, but building relationships and coming back. Every staff has alumni on it. Alumni help contribute to different programs and so on and so forth. So it's a problem that's going on in all sports. And to me, like, standing O for you for like defending yourself and sticking up for yourself, whether you wanted the accolades or whether you even listened to any of the stuff or not, you spoke about how a lot of people feel, a lot of coaches feel. And for that, you should be really proud of yourself. And any school that's looking at you in the near future should be, because you know what? At least you have the guts to say what everybody else is feeling, or at least you have the guts to say what everybody else is also experiencing. Whether you look at it like that or not, that's how I look at it. So, good for you. And it's a shame that you had to deal with that. But you know what? You got a beautiful family at home, you have kids at home, and you made the right decision. Where when I was a head coach, the same thing happened. I had to explain myself to a father of why his kid wasn't the quarterback. And here I am keeping reps and stats of every practice and scrimmage because I knew this conversation was going to happen. I knew it was going to happen. And I knew I wasn't going to get support from the school from it. And, I had to listen to when I played in the 80s, I did this and I did that. And it's like, yeah, this is a different game 40 years later, dude. Like, yeah, and here are the stats, here are the numbers, and this is what coaches are dealing with all the time. And so I think it's great that I got put out there. And so, good for you. And with that being said, obviously putting that out there and talking about that, did you have a fear that this might affect you getting a future job down the road, like stepping away and obviously the school putting out for personal reasons or whatever? But for you, like before you made that decision, you and I have talked, you want to coach. You've said it publicly, you want to coach. Did you feel like this could affect that? Or
Yeah,
still
that
may, or
was
still may?
it probably will in certain places, and I understand that. That was the one thing that kept me from almost not doing it. I walked in there on Friday morning, and I was like, the meet with the administration, and I was like, all right, if there's a solid plan to fix this, I'll listen. And then I walked out, and I wasn't the coach anymore. And the hardest part was knowing that I really love coaching. I have a passion for it. I have a passion for working with children. I work in a middle school right now. That's my life is children. It always has been helping them in all aspects. I'm not worried about coaching again, but the head coaching thing, I think I'm more than qualified to be a head coach, and I really want to be a head coach. And I just know that I can't sacrifice my principles for just that either. So that's showing my family to do the right thing. I felt it was the right thing.
Yeah. And so your goal is your goal in the fall, like, I want to be a head coach again. I want to take over a program. Is that your goal, or are you kind of just going into it saying, "Hey, I want to just get back into the game a little bit"?
No, I'm not. I'm not burnt out at all. I would love to be a head coach. Thoroughly enjoyed my time at Tri County. I thoroughly enjoyed my years at Oliver Ames. Nothing like this happened at those schools ever. Was it always perfect? No, but things were great there. And I think my overall record through those are a lot of years, with 16 years with Tri County of no problems ever, and not when it has to do with that stuff. Yeah, my passion's there. I've been to football games. I've gone to a couple games. I went to watch West Bridgewater play Norwell. Everyone was great there. That was a nice environment. And I went down to Falmouth to watch Falmouth first sandwich, the league championship game. That was fantastic. The crowd, people were great there too. So there's a lot of great places, and hopefully I can find a home soon.
And that's it. And you said it. You're always going to have, parents sitting in the stands or people sitting in the stands critiquing a play call, critiquing what's going on, or maybe second guessing something you did. That's fine. That comes with the territory. That's not the problem. When it's personal and it's consistent and it's to the point that, like, not that you feared your safety, but there was at least a thought of, hey, I want my family coming to this game and hearing this. Hey, some of my assistant coaches are getting, as they're coming out of the booth, they're getting, berated and
I
spoken
don't
to in a
want to deal
certain
with
way.
someone yelling at me walking through the parking lot. Like that's not appropriate. That's not
Right.
like waiting for you at the fence to, waiting for their opportunity to start a confrontation, knowing that you can't do anything about it, knowing that they can do whatever they want to you, and nothing's going to happen to them.
And nothing's going to happen. And shame on administration, shame on the school for knowing that. Because I guarantee you, it's not just football. I guarantee you, especially if it's a parent, that kid plays multiple sports, and that poor kid. I mean, all this aside, maybe it's one or two parents, but those poor kids, I mean, clearly they know their parents have a lot to say, and their parents might be saying the stuff. And for the kid, it might be embarrassing. And for the kid, it might be like really tough for them too in this whole situation. So it's a shame that the school just didn't try to nip it when they could have, or try to get ahead of it, and really just don't. It didn't seem like it. I'm not saying they didn't, but it just seems like they didn't really care, or maybe know how to prevent it or stop it. So, unfortunately, your story is what it is, and hopefully other schools and administrations can learn from this, into understanding that you're a human being at the end of the day. You have a family at the end of the day. This isn't your full-time job. This is you putting your time in, your work in, building relationships, being a good influence. And that's what checks the boxes of coaches. Like, you're a teacher, you get it more than anybody. We have the hours, teachers have the hours to then take off and be able to go coach and be able to have that schedule of school ends. Now I get to go to practice, and that works for you. That fits. That's your life. That's what you devote to it. Like, but to also be spoken to in a certain way and to be treated in a certain way when you have your own family at home is just, after a while, it just gets old and it can wear you out. And you made the right call for yourself the next 10 years down the line, versus that moment of just, what if you did explode? What if you did say something? Then you're the bad guy. No one's going to care what was said to you. No one's going to care
Exactly.
what people did to you. They're just going to look at you being like, you should have been the influence. You should have been better. You should have known better. But no one else has prevented the people who are being the bullies. Like, it's just, it's crazy. But that's the light, coaches are in, unfortunately. Um, my last question to you, and I'm interested in your answer. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy it here. What would be your advice to young coaches that are jumping into you started at 19 years old. I'm sure the way you jumped into the game and the way that it was at 19 is different than maybe some 19, 20, 21-year-old who's looking to jump into it now. What would be your advice to them who are trying to build that career to maybe become a head coach eventually like you did?
Yeah, you have to be patient. You got to be patient and find good people. I think everything is about finding good people and being patient and being listen more than you talk. And especially when we are younger, I thought I knew it all at 23 years old. And I thought I could call every play, but you're not ready for it yet. And just bide your time, take your time, and especially if you want to be a head coach, don't rush into it. Be well rounded. Do offense, do defense. Be the JV head coach. Be the freshman head coach. See if you like that, because some guys don't like that. Some guys just want to call plays, and that's great too. But the patience, and then really researching and spending time on learning how to teach people how to lead, because when you're a head coach, you're a leader more than you are a coach a lot of the time, and that's with your staff. Learn how to treat people well, because I try to coach my coaches the way I would want to have been coached and help them. I think through the years that I've been a head coach, I think you could interview those guys. I think the one thing I'm proud of is those guys learned from me and learned had the process and learned how to be better. So that's my favorite part of it.
No, it's great advice. And I think surrounding yourself with the right people is probably the biggest piece of advice, because there's been some years that I've been on great staffs, whether as an assistant or a head coach, and some years the staff is just different, and so having the right people around you that keep you motivated and keep your work ethic up, I think is extremely important for you to grow as a coach. So I appreciate you coming on here today. I know you're not the type of guy that wants to come on and talk about this type of stuff. I mean, we talked, through messaging at each other and then talking before we kind of hit the play button here. But you're a great coach, you're a great guy, you got a great family, and I think any program would be really lucky to have you. The proof's in the pudding. I mean, anybody who does their homework on you, like I did, found all the things that I found about you and people who spoke about you. So I know you're going to get a job somewhere next year. And I know making a decision like that can affect that sometimes. So a big reason for getting you on here is like, this guy can coach, and this guy's a legit coach, and he made a decision that was best for him and his family. And truthfully, I back you on. I think he made the right decision. And I think hopefully it's a lesson to schools out there and administration out there and other programs out there that this is going on. This isn't just a rare case that happened. This is going on everywhere. And hopefully this is something that changes it, or at least takes the people in the step in the right direction to change it. So I appreciate you coming on here and taking your time. I know you got a busy household at home, and we're big fans of you here, and anything we can do to help you in the future with get head coaching job, or taking some clips from this podcast about the successes that you've had, please feel free to reach out to us. We most certainly will do anything we can for you.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you for having me on, and it was good to talk. It was good to talk football. I do miss it already. I
Yeah,
love
yeah,
football.
and we'll have you back on next year when you're a head coach somewhere else, and be talking about what program that you're going to be bringing to the Super Bowl soon enough.
All right, hopefully.
All right. So from Beyond Podcast, I'm your host, Anthony Petrels, guys. Till next time.